From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
This event is sponsored by the European Division, which is one of 4 area study divisions in the library. We are responsible for recommending from and providing reference for most of the countries of Europe, except Great Britain and Ireland, which is covered by the main reading room, Spain and Portugal, which is covered by the Hispanic Division, and the European part of Turkey, which is covered by the African and Middle East Division. Our collection of Hungarica is the largest outside of Hungary, and numbers about 250,000 volumes, 250,000 volumes of Hungarian or Hungary-related material. If you'd like to know more, you can go to the European Division website, which is 2 clicks off of the homepage. Go to Researchers and then the European Division. András Visky was born in Târgu Mureș, or Marosvásárhely, Romania. He's a poet, playwright, and essayist, and resident dramaturge at Cluj-Napoca Hungarian Theatre in Romania, where he holds the position of Associate Artistic Director. He holds a Doctorate of Liberal Arts from the University of Theatre and Film in Budapest, and since 1994 he has lectured at the Babes-Bolyai University in Cluj in the Department of Theatre and Television. He is one of the co-founders and the former executive director of Koinonia Publishing. His plays have been staged in various countries of Europe and the United States. His work will now reach an English-speaking audience with his latest book, Barrack Dramaturgy, published by Intellect Books and distributed by the University of Chicago Press. It contains an anthology of his well-known plays, as well as a critical analysis of his theory of considering the theater as a space for exploring feelings of cultural and personal captivity. This collection makes use of scripts and directors' notes, as well as interviews and creative teams behind the productions, and reveals an insider's view of Mr. Visky's artistic vision. And we have a small display of his books outside of this room that you can view as you leave. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. András Visky.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Ken, Erika, Natalia. I plan today to speak mostly about this book, about this term Barrack Dramaturgy, which was created by me many years ago. I would like to begin by telling to you that for me the theater it's a tool for creating truth. I used to say that the theater is not a place for me for entertainment. It's a place for serious gatherings. Doesn't mean that I don't like when my audience would laugh during the show, but I think that this is not a purpose. But first of all, let's see how I got to this idea of considering the theater a real event for everybody who takes part to the show. I never divide the space of the theater into the space of the show and the space of the audience. I think that these two are emerging together, are penetrating into each other. My first memory as a child is when I was 1 year old, that I'm a prisoner. After 56, I think that most of you are familiar with the Hungarian Revolution in 56. In Romania, more than 30,000 potential opposers of the regime were sentenced in prison. My father was sentenced for 22 years. So I don't have even a personal memory of my father before his prison ship. Then we were removed in a prison camp. My mother, an Austrian, grown up in Budapest, Hungary, not knowing one word in Romanian language. And we spent there more than 4 years. My father served almost 7 years in the prison. We didn't know about each other. We didn't know about him. Where is him? Is him alive or not? We were totally separated. I am the seventh in my family. So my mother, with 7 very active and very hungry kids, ended up in this prison camp, which has become later on a very famous village for the Romanian intelligentsia, because very interesting people were sentenced together with us to live there. This is the family here. That man, Aurel Pauna, is a student. He was a student during the Hungarian Revolution. He was a student in Timișoara. Now he's a page of the Romanian history because he was the one who formulated the revendications of the Romanian students influenced by the Hungarian Revolution in Romania. So after the prison he came, after the prison he was sentenced again to not to go home but to stay in this prison camp, which are probably familiar to you because of the novels of Solzhenitsyn or Shalamov, right? So you can see how a barrack would look. It's behind us. And I am down there, the fairly depressed youngest child. Here is famous photo. Is the winter in our prison camp. The winters were unbelievably strong. There is a wind which is called krivets. This is coming from Russia and brings a lot of snow. For instance, I remember when the snow covered up totally our barrack, but it happened very often during the it was a plain field, no trees, only these barracks, and we got covered up totally by the snow. I thought for years that this is only the image of my imagination. And then I found a photography how the people are walking on their roof. It's like a Chagall painting, like people floating above their homes and being a part of a mythology. So what I'm speaking about now is that for me, it's hardly separable, the reality from the mythology. I think that the imagination, sometimes it's a much stronger reality than the reality, which is hiding from us. It's very hard to grasp the reality. Actually, this is the main reason we are doing theater. Not to create an illusion, but to create a counter-reality in order to understand better our own reality. Here, the man there, I really love this picture. His name is Paul Goma, a famous Romanian author who, after the prison, came to our camp. Now this is a map of the camp did by that student who is behind us in the camp. A very famous map. I have the original one, but there is a version in a museum in Romania, the Museum of the Communist Terror in Romania, in Máramaros-sziget. You can find our name also there. Let me show it to you. Oh, excuse me. This is the family, Visky. But there are other very famous names also. For instance, in the same village lived the wife of the former Prime Minister of Romania, Maria Antonescu. I remember her very well. Former members of government. And you won't believe probably that I don't know how, but I'm researching now, I'm working now on a novel of the village. It landed there a piano also in this village. I probably it's like a part of this theatricality of the place. Or I was together there with the first Romanian woman pilot, Nadia Russo. A very well-known name now. Okay, so let's come back to the cover. So I think that this experience of being a prisoner first for myself, then being released, but during the dictatorship, so it was a semi-freedom then afterwards until 89, brought me to this idea that the captivity is a universal experience of the humanity. I have a definition of the captivity. Now be attentive and very... You know, my definition of captivity is that captivity is a state of being in which we are dislocated from our bodies. So we are dislocated from our bodies. What does it mean this? That a prisoner is never present in his cell. He's not there. He's always elsewhere. So a prisoner always creates his or her own double, like Artaud would say, the great French artist. That double, so I relate to that double, which is an expression of freedom for me, but I am a prisoner. So what is the theatrical space for me? Is a space where we freely shut ourselves in order to be set free by the event what happens there. What does it mean to set free? Don't think about something big. a special understanding of yourself, a new understanding of your identity or your own personal story, or regarding your relationships, etc., etc. So I think that the 20th century created this kind of universal aspect of the human being to create huge factories to exterminate people. You know, for instance, Gulag, what does it mean, Gulag? You know, Gulag is an acronym which means that chief quarter of camps. That would be the Russian meaning of this. Corrective camps. This is a euphemism for extermination camp. You know, because when someone wants to correct you, or in a prison, I mean, we were political prisoners, right? We were there because of our convictions about freedom, about the rights of a person. Then a corrective camp means extermination camp, right? So, but in the same time, don't think that for a child to be a prisoner in a Gulag camp was very sad. I try to be happy. To my older siblings, they kept teaching me to recognize my father on small black and white photos. And I couldn't recognize him all the time. And that's a sort of big trauma for me. How to not recognize your father? That's not possible. Okay, so my poetry, my writings are focused on this idea of being dislocated, and we are addicted to the freedom. That would be probably the definition of a human being. So the lack of freedom creates big traumas for us. If we shut in ourselves in a theater, that would mean that there is no hierarchy between actors and audience. So I don't write stories for the stage. I try to write snapshots with big open spaces and empty spaces in order to offer for the audience to enter in the story, to offer for them to recognize themselves in the play. So what happens in a cell? The freedom is highly fictionalized. The freedom. The space is always tight. If you move, you bump in somebody. If you move, you create a conflict. So the level of the solidarity in a cell should be much, much higher than in the normal life. And what happens in a cell? Obsessive rituals, which you cannot control. You have to follow them. These are not happy rituals, but these rituals help you to survive. So I showed you how a barrack looked like. I remember, for instance, a group of Franciscan monks who served in the prison, I don't know, more than 10 years. Then they were removed to our camp. And one of them, he made, actually he was a Romanian man, he was a priest actually. He made a small chapel in his barrack. And I remember going there in this chapel, entering this chapel, and the lights, that dim space, and watching these people like singing and elevating their souls. And I remember very well one man who was the main singer. When he came out, when the service ended, he always kissed the ground. And that was for me ununderstandable. How would you kiss the ground of your detention? What is this space about? I think that's why I ended up in a theater, because of this theatricality of the loneliness. And I remember once everybody left the barrack, and I stayed there and I kissed the ground. And I feel even today the ground it was very cold, and it was not nice at all. And then again, I couldn't understand why. What's that now? So I discovered a reality. I discovered an inner reality, which is as big as the outer reality. You can go in. You can disappear in this inner reality also. So when I began to write plays, that was my main focus. To follow different situation of imprisonment, dependencies, which is in the same way an imprisonment. So let me show to you images. This is a play which was produced in Chicago in 2 different versions, and it's called Juliet. It's not called Romeo and Juliet, only Juliet. Because in my play, Romeo is in prison, and Juliet, my mother, is with us. So it's a rewriting of Shakespeare in a way, because my mother went to a death experience in the camp. They take her away from us, and we were expecting to remain alone, which was one of the most tragic outcome for the children in all kind of dictatorships, I think, because they put you in different orphanages. So you get cut off from every personal relationship from everybody. And they have taken my mother, but after a few days, she came back to us. So I wrote a play about the disappearance of my mother and the resurrection of my mother. That how Juliet is resurrecting in not the best moment in her grave. Her name is Julia, the name of my mother. So that's why Juliet, the play. This is another one, a part of a trilogy. I will speak more about this a little bit. It's called Born for Never. 10 actors are on the stage, but only one. I'm going 1 second there. Only one, this one, in this solitary confinement, who is the author. Only him is real on the stage. Everybody's coming out from his imagination. You can see the space, it's like a skin, but the writing, it's not readable on that skin. So what the performance is doing, reveals the story of these people, reveals this writing during the show. It went, I'm happy with this, it went very well at the Festival d'Avignon, toured in Europe in many, many places. And I tried to combine the stories of the Holocaust with the stories of the Gulag. Because in the prison, one of my father's cellmate, was a man, a Holocaust survivor, who then was sentenced again, so he was a professional prisoner. And I dedicated to him this writing, actually. And when he went to, in this cell, for instance, to talk to my father, he always touched the bed like the mezuzah to enter the space of the... And that was for me, that story for me was unbelievable. This is the way to transform a cell in your private freedom. In order to follow that ritual, which brings you back in time and brings you back in a different space. This is the way to deny the cell. And I was very glad to hear this story, so I wrote a play dedicated to him. In this image you can see I created a character. He's a handicapped man. And everybody has to carry him around. And interestingly, it creates a sort of humor in the piece also, because they tend to forget him. And then they are going back and they are holding and they are bringing with them. So, because I saw many people in the prison camp, very old people, for instance, who could not provide their food. That was the daily project, to provide your food. I asked once my mother, what did you do when we haven't anything to eat? And she told me, I told you stories and I sang to you. Which is genius. Yeah. Which is beautiful. So, this play, it's called I Killed My Mother. My titles, you can see, are very gentle and very inviting for everybody. Yeah. This is the La Mama version in New York, which was a joy for me, very well received. Melissa Loran, Andrew Livingston. And the other thing which I would mention here to you, because this is important actually for me, that I'm very interested in this idea of open dramaturgy when I'm doing a theater piece. That means that I don't decide the number of characters even in the play. I offer a text, a texture rather than a text, and I offer, if it's possible, total freedom for the company, for the director. Because in the theater, a text never saves you. Because we can destroy even a genius Shakespeare text. Sometimes Hamlet is boring too, right? Not the text saves you, but your courage to get in that story and to consider your own. Yeah. This is a play which is running now back home. in Hungarian language now. Juliet is running now both in Romanian language and Hungarian language in 3 different places. The title of this play is the following: Be Very Strong Now. It's porn. It's P-O-R-N. And it's about political pornography. What does it mean, political pornography? But there are periods in the history when the politicians want to own our body, want to own our intimate life. What happened to us in 86, I became officially a political dissident. And we noticed the moment when they bugged our apartment. We were a very young couple with my wife, and we asked ourselves now how to make love. What does it mean, an intimacy of your own life? After 89, I got from the Romanian Minister of Internal Affairs my secret files, 1,300 pages. And I took these files and I exhibited all of them. So when the audience enters the space of this show, they go through my files and they can watch. We have also photos taken by the secret police. Very dear for me in a way, because we are on the street talking to my wife, and after 2 kids, she got pregnant again, and she lost her baby when she was 6 months old, but she couldn't abort. And in the hospital, they didn't want to intervene, and we counted backwards the days, because she was very close to die in a septic shock. So this is the play about. Porn is the code name of this character, followed by the secret police. My friends are telling me that why you are giving so hopeless titles for your play. Please stop doing that. I think I told this yesterday. I remember after the show directed by Natalia, I told this yesterday that I don't want to be a merchant of a cheap hope, because I don't see around me this very easygoing way to resolve our problems. So if somebody is not coming to see my play because of the title, that's still fine. I am fighting successfully against success. This is a play which I loved a lot. It was produced by the Hungarian National Theatre in Transylvania. The other one, the previous one, was commissioned by the Hungarian National Theatre in Budapest to write that play, and it was performed in various versions. This play is called Alcoholics. I read an interview with a woman, an addicted woman, who told her story in a newspaper, and the story, it was fascinating, of a bride. She's not alcoholic anymore, but she's telling the way how she went through this extremely hard experience, you know. And this is an image of that production. As you can see, again, is the same dramaturgy, only the main character is a real person, and the others are coming out from her imagination. And this is humorous and funny and painful in the same time. It's a garbage dump there. Yeah. And finally, I think this play, it's called Caravaggio Terminal. It's about Caravaggio. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this early Baroque, late Renaissance painter. He became a very close friend of me. He was a really genius and one of the biggest painters in the 17th century. He died in 1610 at a very early age. I fell in love with him because he could never integrate in the system. He got commissions being genius, but then the system got him, went against him, so he had to leave Rome. He went to La Valletta, and he wanted always to come back to Rome. And I was very interested in the way how he preserves his freedom. He got the highest commissions in Rome. If you are going to Rome, Santa Maria del Popolo church, you can see two of his paintings, San Luigi Francesi, other two major paintings. And I try to follow his way of being free, or being radical in his messages. And just one trunk remained after him at Porto Ercole. And in spite of getting the highest commissions in his time, nothing remained after him. He gave away all his money all the time. So he never became an established artist. Sometimes my kids are telling me that it's the time for you to become an established artist. Okay. So now to summarize a little bit, and I will finish here. What does it mean to be removed from your space of freedom? It means a trauma which creates, for instance, a very special amnesia for you. Or it creates, it's called also anomia. Anomia means, nomos means word or law. So you are an outcast when somebody rapes your freedom. Right? What does it mean this? That means that you forgot totally the language. Now, metaphorically speaking, we lose the meanings of our words. What happened after the Second World War? The major authors of the Western culture are speaking about the impossibility to use again the same language. Where to go now? What is the meaning of this consensus for everybody? Right? Thou shalt not kill. After, for instance, Auschwitz, when killing kids, killing mothers in a professional way. And one of my favorite authors who was awarded with Nobel Prize, Imre Kertész, in 2002. I knew him personally. And I even rewrote one of his novels in 3 different versions for the stage. For one-man show, 10 actors, and again for 10 actors. In his acceptance speech delivered in Stockholm, he speaks about this, that for him, the hardest part of his life after coming home from a prison camp was to reconstruct the language, to create new meanings. Who is, from this point of view, my master in the history of the Western theatre? It's Samuel Beckett. Samuel Beckett, the former disciple of James Joyce. You know, a novel of James Joyce, it's as rich as the creation. Ulysses. And Samuel Beckett wanted to follow the same path. And after the war, that path got close to him. It was an abyss, not a road. And then he tells this very famous phrase that it was a mystical turn he names like this, a mystical turn in his life, when he says that subtracting rather than adding. So he created a very poor language, almost a non-language. He created a poetry of the depraved. So he created the space of the theater where a loop dramaturgy, what does it mean, this loop dramaturgy? The endlessness is going around all the time, waiting for Godot, Endgame, his genius radio plays, Footfalls, etc. It's going always around, and tries to expand the time. Because he doesn't feel the possibility to go further. Sometimes in the theater, this is what I am doing. Don't go further. Slow down. Be more radical with yourself. And if somebody in the audience would get bored, this is also part of the event. I don't want to torture you now in the theater, but sometimes it happens. Yeah. Yeah. So, because the basic question is always for a playwright, what happened to us? What happened to me? So, the drama, the play, is a literary text created with a no language. And we can understand it because of the actors. Only because of the actors. If they don't offer totally their lives for us, we won't understand the play. I think that we cannot understand Hamlet either, of the very funny Molière. So sometimes I direct, but very rarely, and my actors are asking, what is your main direction to me, stage direction? You need to die on the stage. And you need then, when we are applauding you, you need to resurrect and to smile to us. Thank you very much.
I think we have time for a few questions. So far away.
any definition, you and your family were tortured by the communist regime, emotionally, physically, whatever. And it comes 1989, and the door of the prison opens. Why did you decide to stay at the locale of the torture? Why aren't you living in Switzerland or Denmark or wherever?
I lived in United States, working as a visiting professor here, and I got many offers to stay with my family, but I realized that that I don't want to construct a different identity for myself. I have my own stories. I have to tell these stories, and I think that after '89, both in Romania or Hungary or that region, it was a big challenge to work on this an idea of the freedom or social justice, or especially as a playwright, I'm considered the first who wrote plays about the communist past. And it was a big surprise for me that nobody wanted to speak about that past. So I think that my career or my journey cannot be described with these geographical regions, Switzerland, or this heaven of banks or whatever. I don't know. I can see floating banks around me. I think that it's much, for me as a writer, much important to go back in time and to create pages or images which tell to my audience that the most fragile aspect of the human life is the freedom. And time to time, we are ready to give up our freedom, to invest our freedom in somebody, to hate him, instead of hating ourselves by giving up our freedom. And also, it's important for a writer to be surrounded, I think, if you don't switch your language, by those who are speaking the same language. To follow how the language, the evolution of the language, the evolution of the meanings, how language is being changed after '89, for instance, in our region. For me, '89, it was a big and happy event. I was vice president of the county, for instance. But I realized after a while that I have to resign not to destroy now totally this county, to offer the space for somebody else for it. You know how it affected for us young professionals, intellectuals, university professors. It was the time to construct things from zero. I can mention the publishing house. I'm not doing it anymore. I worked on creating out of blue a theater department as a part of our university. Babes-Bolyai University is a huge university of Cluj. We have almost 60,000 students. I was very challenged because of these opportunities. And I began to travel everywhere in the world, but I realized that in most of the big democratic countries, everything is almost done. I don't want to enter in something new.
And your writing, has it affected your writing, this newfound freedom?
Probably a lot. I don't know, because you don't have the counter test for this. I'm sure it's, just let you tell you one aspect. It took a long time to kill the inner censorship in your mind, to don't censor yourself. Because the censorship, it's both a political aspect, but it becomes a part of your identity. So you need to be very courageous to go against this. Okay?
It seems like you can only, those who celebrate freedom are those who've been in captivity. I've sensed in your works a longing to go back to captivity because of the treasures and the wonder and the joy of experiencing the freedom that came afterwards. And even in that, my big question, is it possible to find freedom without captivity?
I think that that the captivity is not simply a political term. It could be a very personal term. So I think that, but this is a common sense, that the freedom is not a given thing, but I think that the captivity is a given thing. The structure of, I sorry for that, but I'm not very optimistic regarding the human being generally, because I got to see things, a lot of things around me, people dying on the street, in that prison camp also, mothers, that was unbelievable, especially the summer, the winters. I still dream with these winters. I have the sound of the for me the snowing is not that romantic. I could see my mother, how she tries to hide herself to not to be watched, how she cries. Now what's next? I think that the captivity, well, I don't want you now to become prisoners today. I cannot help you in this, but the captivity in many ways makes you mature. I was a child, but I noticed that much mature than many others. But in the same time, also for me the captivity is a so special experience of the body that sometimes I feel that I remained in many ways a prisoner, not having the trust sometimes in people around me, or that level of trust you need to continue your life.
Would you please define Barrack Dramaturgy for us on that? And does this dramaturgy apply to all of your plays?
I don't know, read the book, because there are, I don't know how many, 7, 8 critical essays about what I'm doing now. But, Barrack Dramaturgy, I consider the theater being a prison. We enter the prison and we get out from the prison. Yeah, for instance, in one of my plays, we shut the audience behind a curtain, iron curtain. And it was very meaningful for them, because the iron curtain as a metaphor of the Eastern Bloc and the concreteness of the iron, which there were people very disturbed because of that. Historically speaking, because you are a director, historically speaking, the black box is the tomb, is the empty tomb. You remember very well the vain verities trope, 8th, 9th century, when the theater again, after 1,000 years of silence, we haven't had theater for 1,000 years. When I say this, I'm speaking about professional theater. After the Greek wonder, it was, they say, the historians say that it was 1,000 years without theater. And then in the 8th, 9th century, it emerged from the Catholic liturgy in the Western. I'm speaking about the Western culture. I'm the the child of the Western culture. So if I am telling you this, that the architecture of the black box goes back to the empty tomb. That's right. So what the actors are doing, they enter the empty tomb. They are dying as persons. We see them as characters, and they are coming out from the empty tomb. It's the same. I don't. The Barrack dramaturgy for me, that's why is important, because it's very personal, and in the same time, historically speaking, you have a foundation for it.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.